Hey, good morning. All right. I was, recently, I go through binges in martial arts. I'm like, Silat, gotta look at Elder Silat. And sometimes I'll be like, Morni Maul and his Silat Sufyan Beladir. I'll get obsessed with that. Sometimes for the better part of a year, right? And then, certainly when I was in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I watched video after video, competition after competition, instruction after instructional. And, it's all good. I love martial arts, right? To this day. And it's incredible because when I first started it as a kid, I didn't like it. So it grew on me. Um, like, not like a cancer grows on you and takes over and kills you. It's almost like a external symbiotic creature that enhanced me, like midichlorians or something. So, my most recent binge, I'm almost ashamed to admit this, is ninjutsu. You're like, ninjutsu, you're just nostalgic for the 80s. I'm like, well, there's good things in the 80s, there's bad things in the 80s, and there's tons of good stuff now. So, yeah, ninjutsu. So I watched a fairly recent video of Stephen K. Hayes doing his Toshindo interpretation of ninjutsu. And I just want to say this, first of all, before I even get started on the topic. Master Hayes, you did it the right way. I mean, when you started out in martial arts, I think you were doing Tang Soo Do. You went all the way to Japan, started again in ninjutsu. And from what I can tell, after about 4 or 5 years, you were made a Shidoshi. So you were flash promoted from nobody to about fifth dan, and you came over here to the U.S. and even I questioned him, like, is this guy legit? Is he a for real ninja? And there were no videos available back then. And a little bit later in the 80s, the video that I could have seen, I seen bits of it, didn't make it look that hot. But the books were fun and amazing, and me and my friend Scott used to pretend to be ninjas, and we'd go to Veterans Park and attack each other with sticks, yelling and screaming, in sneakers, white gi bottoms, and t-shirts, yelling, ah! And the cops would get called on us, and they'd be like, what are you kids doing? People are complaining. I'm like, we're practicing ninjutsu. And they're like, well, if you're going to run around like cowboys and Indians, I guess we can't stop you, but just keep the noise down. Yes, sir. And we went back to being ninjas. And, yeah. But here it is. Decades later, you're in the century after that. And you formed your Toshindo, I think, after you got your 10th Dan. Which many people are like, well, I got my first degree in this and studied judo for a while and looked at some boxing videos. I think I'm going to invent my new system and make myself a 10th Dan. You did it the right way. So I'm watching your stuff. And one of your martial arts museum masterclass videos, and you're demonstrating a defense where you're kind of pinned against the wall. And a couple other videos against what I would call very realistic real world attacks, where someone's grabbing you and punching you repeatedly and roughing you up, and then another video where someone's got you and slams you against the wall, and the guy wasn't moving full speed, full tilt, and neither were you, and you demonstrated, and it was very freeform. He didn't attack you the same way each time, and you demonstrated freeform techniques, and I thought it was great. I'm like, great. He took his ancient art and developed in a certain context, practiced later in a certain way, and he said, let me just adapt it. But you're absolutely, completely, totally still sticking to the principles of your art, 100%. What you're doing isn't Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's not Muay Thai, it's not Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, it's not Karate. It is the style you've always done, but you've updated some of the training methods, especially in terms of like the kind of attacks you get. I've said this before, I'll say it again. You're really only as good as the resistance you're training against, right? If you're constantly training against lunge punches, and simple clothing grabs, well, that's about as good as you are. Now, if the person starts throwing jabs, crosses, hooks, or unorthodox techniques, spinning back fists, tiger claws, reverse punches, now your skill level rises up, even if you're just doing the same techniques, because now you're working it against different forms of resistance, right? And if you're just doing point sparring, you're not ready for the cage. If you're doing MMA or kickboxing and you've never once addressed what happens when someone grabs you from behind, or picks up a stick and starts wailing you with it, you're woefully unprepared, right? You're completely out of your element. So you don't necessarily have to change martial arts. You have to change levels of resistance and the different types of drills you introduce. So I was very impressed. Stephen Hayes, you're in the same doggone shape you were when you came back from Japan. You're like 70, over 70, right? Your hair is white, your beard is white, but you're still able to move. You move great. Your body still has the same composition. You haven't been idle. And I'm scrolling through the comments, and someone who, by the way, has zero martial art instructional videos that they've put up. They have nothing to contribute to the martial arts. They put up none of their own performances, none of their own teaching, not even one of their own lectures, just videos of other people, and most of it not related to martial arts, right? Including an illegal upload of scars. So if you're Jerry Peterson, on the lookout for that, right? But anyway, he says, "Oh, this looks good, but if the person has a knife, I mean, how valid could this be? This isn't going to work. It's useless," or something to that effect. And I'm like, all right, first of all, a defense against a grab and punch not being valid against a defense against stabs and slashes from an armed knife-wielding attacker. It isn't supposed to necessarily work against stabs and slashes from a knife-wielding attacker. That's dumb. That's like saying, well, you've got this automobile, but if you put it in orbit, I mean, it's got no life support system and you'll die, so therefore your car is useless. It's like saying, well, you've got a handgun, and I'm sure if you're just defending yourself in your house, might be good, but it'll be useless on the battlefield against the Russian T-90 or against air assault. So that handgun is actually pretty useless. You should carry a rocket launcher with you. Dumb, 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 dumb. Internet martial artists are just dumb. Okay, many of them. Second of all, I wonder if he was looking at what Master Hayes was doing. In the video, the grab and punch, the guy's grabbing him, shaking him around, pulling him into punches, pushing him back to create room to punch. And so the first thing Stephen Hayes does is he gets his hands up and he moves up offline. All right? And he's, parrying and blocking what's coming at him, and then, but not facing directly. Right, he immediately gets offline controls. He starts his own hit. Once he gets the hit, he's got his foot moving in to unbalance the guy. He's got his hand unbalancing the guy. He takes him down and he hits him. I'm like, dude, I don't think you understand this, but that is actually a smart thing to do against a knife. If someone has stepped up to grabbing range, grab you and started stabbing you, first of all, simultaneously controlling that limb as you get out of the way, hitting him and unbalancing him is what people have done to survive knife attacks, right? There are many, many instances of people surviving a knife attack. It wasn't pretty, picture perfect. It was chaotic. But people did survive it. Some people survive it with fairly low damage. Some people took a hell of a lot of damage, had to check into the hospital, fight for their life over days, and they've made it, and they've earned the right to say, well, let me tell you about my experience. Here's what I found out. One of them is my dad. My dad, I guess this would have been in the 60s or 70s. It was probably after I was born. um, or maybe a little before I was born in 1969. It was around that time, and he worked for Mobil Oil, and he was a lab technician, but he had invested his money in some property, and he was raising livestock on it, and he was having someone raise livestock, and he had an employee. He wanted to point out that the guy was Kurdish, all right, but I mean, obviously, Kurdish people, Turkish people, white people, we're all people, right? And most of us are bastards and sons of bitches and cocksuckers. So yeah, we're all equal in how effed up we are. There's no monopoly, right? And he said, I think he wanted to fire the guy or criticize him for something. He was doing something that my dad disagreed with that was bad enough for him to fire the guy. And the guy drew a knife and came at him, right? And I was like, at that time I was old enough to know a smidgen of martial arts and be interested in this stuff. There were black belt and inside kung fu magazines in the house. And I said, what did you do? And he says, well, if you ever have to block a knife, use this back part of your hand to block it. And he said, he had a lot of experience in Kurash, which is an Uzbek type of wrestling, Turco-Mongol wrestling. And he said, I got him and I grabbed him and I threw him down. And, he didn't elaborate on what he did once he threw the guy down, but I'm guessing he threw him down and held him, right? At the least, at the most, he probably punched him up and kicked him a bit, and he showed me the line on his hand. So, I'm assuming, like Stephen Hayes, don't just block, right? Don't just block. Cover yourself, get out of the way, secure that knife, do a counterattack, subdue him. That's what Stephen Hayes was doing against the grab and punch. And it would be valid against the knife, except I'm pretty sure Stephen Hayes, his ninjutsu has a potential to be very vicious. I'm pretty sure he would have applied a hell of a lot more punishment to that knife-wielding attacker in the process of defending. So, yeah, I had to call this out because it's just stupid. If you're one of those people that constantly does this, well, yeah, that defense against the headlock wouldn't work against one of the Gracies. Bro, if you're in grappling range with one of the Gracies, there's not a lot that will work. Okay? They're the Gracies. That whole entire family, as soon as that kid is able to, is taught jiu-jitsu, right? But they're probably in diapers and they're taught how to do a technical stand-up and how to roll and everything, and they're on the mat, and as soon as possible they're rolling, right? And they're getting one-on-one instruction. Yeah, it wouldn't work against the Gracies. But I've been in headlocks that I've gotten out of. Punching the balls. Punch those balls. Punch them, punch them, punch them. Even people that are drunk, very drunk, and have a higher pain tolerance, you throw 3 or 4 uppercuts into a guy's testicles while he's headlocking you and punching you in the head. I'll take more punches to the head to get those testicle shots. I know I did. That person let go. Right? The fight took another intensity. We resumed striking, but there were 2 of them at the time. They were both, one was headlocking me and punching me in the face while the other punched me in the face. And I punched one testicle a couple times, and I punched the other, and then I punched back to the first, and I was able to get loose, and then they both started punching me, and then my friends intervened, and those 2 guys got knocked out. All right? I was in my 20s. Yeah. If you're constantly doing this, right? Check yourself. You might be a douchebag. You might be one of those martial art douchebags that thinks that the way to assert your knowledge and skill is to tear everything else down that is better than you, that has more experience than you, that has something you don't have, rather than go out there and learn and build yourself up. You need to understand others before you can be understood. That should be your goal. All right? I'm I'm not a Jordan Peterson type of guy that tells you no matter what's happening out there, you're not allowed to address it till you go and clean your room. I mean, if a bunch of cops are raping babies on the street in a black neighborhood, my impulse isn't, hey, let me go clean my room and ignore that until my life is perfectly straight. Then I'll come back and say something. No, I'll intervene. Um, but you need to understand, if you want to change the world, you need to be the kind of person that's always trying to understand, trying to think, trying to research, right? Yeah, if there's an emergency outside, go and respond to it. But if you perceive that there's this vast wave of incompetency in the martial arts that you need to instantly yap about, and you may never had a black belt, you may have never gotten up to green belt level, you may have never, say you were in a combat sport, may have never gotten the ring for a second amateur fight or even a first. You might be the douchebag in this equation. All right, my people, I wish you the best. Be the knowledgeable one. Be the one researching, thinking, training, learning, teaching, and learning. Don't be the douchebag. There is nothing in it for you beyond continued douchebaggery.